Hello, welcome to the third part of the video for Lab 9 on JavaScript user-defined functions for CS115. In this video, I'm going to go through the task 3 coffee calculations. The previous videos covered the sort of definition of a function, what are they, how do they work, just a very brief intro, and then the task 1. That was the first video is those two things. The second video was task 2, the birthday wisher. This third video is on task 3, the coffee calculations. And so, in this task, we are doing yet another custom JavaScript function to take some values from the page and when a button is clicked, put some other values in the page. We've already done this coffee calculation thing before using prompts and alerts, or even prompts and putting a value in the page. Now we're going to have it be more responsive where it is inputs and a button to click. Here I have the page loaded up. It has these two inputs, and then it has this button. And if I refresh this page and click the button, nothing happens. And if I open my inspector, I will see two error messages. One saying that the script failed to load, and the other saying that give feedback is not defined. Okay, and that's because I haven't started working on it yet, right? But we want to be able to get rid of these messages and make sure they go away when I do start working. All right, it says open the file, look at it, and then start a new file named coffee.js. So that's why the script wasn't loaded, is we have to create that file. Let me go ahead and look at that file briefly. So here's the coffee.html. We have a head, a body. In the body, I'm looking for these ID equals, right? Those are the places where I'm going to take values from the page or insert them into the page. So cups per day ID, cost per cup ID, and then down here there's a results ID. And here's my button, by the way, with an on-click value of give feedback. That tells me the name of the function I need to define. So I'm going to go ahead and create that coffee.js, right? Here's the link to the script that doesn't exist. So new file. I'm going to go ahead and save as immediately and do coffee.js. Make sure it's in that same folder as coffee.html. Go ahead and save that. Watch what happens if I make, well, I'm going to go ahead. All right, see that, coffee.js, coffee.html, they should be linked. I can test that. I can say alert, hi. And now as soon as I load the page, over here, I should see hi pops up. And look at that, no error. Still, if I click the button, I get this error that give feedback is not defined because the button is saying, hey, give the feedback. And JavaScript is saying, you want me to call this function called give feedback. You want me to sort of go to that recipe or that stored piece of code and run that code. But you never defined that code. You never told me what it was, so I can't do that. And so that's our first task here, is to define a function called function give feedback. And we're going to have our curly braces, we're going to have our parentheses. All right, and I'm also going to just put alert hi. So what is the function going to do? It's just going to pop up an alert to tell me it's working. Going to go back over to the page here, refresh, okay, click the button, hi pops up. So good. That is our basic connectivity working. We have the JavaScript file that we created, we have the function we defined, the button is linked to the function, and it all works. Every time I click this button, should pop up with hi. Great. All right. Next thing that we're going to do is go back to the instructions. So here's the function, and here's what it should do. And again, I'm just going to copy these instructions, which are a nice rundown of everything the function needs to do. I'm going to go over to my file. I need two things. I need a comment before this function saying, what does it do? And then I'm going to paste what I copied inside the file, because these comments are sort of a step-by-step or a play-by-play of what this function does. That can actually go there. Okay, so it looks like there's 4 steps. We're going to be reading from the web page, calculating the coffee cost, deciding a commentary message, and putting the results in the page. So my comment for the whole function is going to be reads info from the page on coffee cost per day. Maybe I'll say coffee cups or cups per day and cost per cup. Computes cost per week and displays a message about that. All right, so that's my summary of what this function does. I always try to start my functions by writing that summary because it sort of helps like organize in my mind, okay, what am I doing here? What is this function supposed to do? And sometimes while I'm writing that summary, I'll realize something like, oh, wait a second, this function can't really do that thing because something else isn't prepared for that yet, or something like that. And the act of writing that description is just like super useful. I recommend you always start with it. If you cannot write that description because you don't understand what the function is supposed to do, then probably before starting to write the code for the function, you ought to go ahead and read more about what it's supposed to do so you can at least write your own description in your own words of what that function does. All right, function give feedback. Again, let me do this step by step like I did for the birthday wisher. So, reads from the web page. All right, that sounds like a document.getElementById.value, right, or .inner HTML. The number of cups of coffee the user buys on an average day. Looking at the web page, I have my cups per day ID, right, which is an input of type text. And if I look at the web page in the rendered version, here I have an input, how many cups of coffee do you buy on average a day, right? So cool. That is going to be the right place I want to pull information from. I'm going to go back over here and get this ID value. And in the JavaScript, I'm going to say var cups per day is equal to document.getElementById, paste that ID value, dot value. This is the same thing I talked about in part 2 on the birthday wisher. Input elements don't have inner HTML, they have value. And so I'm going to also parse int. Actually, maybe I'll parse float because that could be a decimal number. If I have parentheses, I can make new lines wherever I want, so I'm just going to try to keep things readable here. So that's my cups per day. I'm going to take the value of this input, and then I'm going to parse it into a float and store it in a variable. I'm going to go ahead and make a cost per cup, and that's going to be this ID here. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go ahead and paste it there. All right, cost per cup is that value of that other input, again parsed as a floating point number. Cool, let me test that part. So console.log, the costs, or no, user inputs, and the cups per day, and the cost per cup. All right, this is just going to sort of display those things to me so I can see what they look like. I'm going to go ahead and run the page. Nothing happens, right? Because the function is storing that code for later use. It is not running that code right now. When I click the button, it'll run. So I'm looking for 1 and 3. Click the button. User inputs 1 and 3. If I change them to 17 and 29.4, click the button. Okay, 1729.4 looks good. If I enter something that's not a number, like ha ha ha. Okay, not a number and 29.4. You got me there, JavaScript. It definitely isn't a number. That's probably going to mess things up, but I'm just going to assume that the user is going to enter a number value there. And see here it says here in dollars. Here, if I wanted to, I could say like as a number, just to make that clear. All right. So that much of the code is working. We're getting the values correctly. Over here in give feedback, the next step is calculate the user's weekly coffee cost. So let's do that. For weekly cost is, so there are 7 days per week times the cups per day is going to be, so cups per day times days. The days cancel and we're going to get cups. So that's going to be cups times cost per cup. So again, cost per cup, cups times cost per cup. The cups cancel, we get cost. So that's going to be a value in dollars. It can be nice to sort of check your logic of your math like that by saying, hey, if I'm multiplying these things, do they have the right units to get the units I want in the end? So the weekly cost is 7 cups per day, or 7 days per week times so many cups per day times so many costs per cup. That's going to be a weekly cost. And let us console.log cost per week and the weekly cost. All right. Refresh that page. Click it. 720.3. I have no idea if that's correct or not. Let me simplify things. 1 cup of coffee per day at $1 per cup. That should be $7 per week, right? 7. Okay, good. $1 per, or 1 cup per day at $2 per cup should be $14, right? 2 cups per day at $2 per cup should be $28 per week. So it looks like that is working correctly, right? Now, I realize it may not be this smooth for you, right? There may be little hang-ups, different things that don't seem to be working quite right. Remember to check that console for error messages that will give you hints about what's not working. And feel free to send me an email or drop by office hours to ask questions about things that don't make sense to you. I'm totally happy to answer any kind of question, from the most complex, theoretical, high-level question to the simplest, like, why is this code not working? And the answer is, I forgot a semicolon, right? I'm happy to answer all those questions. All right, so we have the cost per week. Next step, based on the cost per week, this has a commentary message. See below for a reminder. So we're going to have to go back to the instructions over here. Right, that's another benefit of copy pasting these instructions as comments. We don't have to go back and forth quite so much. Here's an example. As a reminder, here's the commentary messages. So I'm going to copy paste these. These are our commentary messages. And here, I'm going to paste them in. All right, so this is the same thing that we did before. We're going to have a message variable, and then we're going to have an if statement. And the if statement is going to determine different values for that variable depending. So I'm going to actually just take that whole string right there. Whoops. Wanted to cut that, not undo. Okay, message is that. And so it says, okay, if the weekly amount is less than 10, then this is the message. So I'm going to say that if the weekly cost is less than 10, this is the message. And then how I'm going to do this, okay, if the weekly amount is from 10 to 30, well, I could do a separate if statement that says if weekly cost is greater than or equal to 10 and the weekly cost is less than 30. But instead I can just say else if the weekly cost is less than 30. And by saying else if here, I am saying this if is only going to happen if this other if is false. And if this other if is false, what do I know about the weekly cost? Well, if it's not less than 10, it must be greater than or equal to 10, right? As long as it's a number. And so by saying else if here, I just have to have one condition. Else if is implicitly saying it's greater than or equal to 10, and then the extra condition is it's also less than 30. All right, and so I'm going to take this message here and say the message is that. And then guess what? Another else if the weekly cost is less than, so 30 to 50, so this is going to be 50. I'm going to take this here and message is that. All right, and then if it's more than $50 per week, I can just say else. Because in all other cases, right, if it's not any of these things, well, by process of elimination, it must be $50 a week or more. If I want it to be strictly more than 50 per week, maybe I'll make this into a less than or equal to, so that exactly 50 is included in this message. Go ahead and take this message and say message is that. All right. So that is our code that decides on a message. I'm going to console.log the message. We can see what it is, right? We can basically develop this function step by step and keep making sure it works up to a certain point and then move on to the next step. Going back over here, refresh this. 2 cups of coffee per day, $2 per cup. That's 28. Coffee Genie, cost per week is 28. Okay, that's a little pricey, but still not too bad. Is that the right message? That's this message for less than 30. 28 is indeed less than 30, so I'm happy with that. Let's test it for some other values, right? And again, I don't have to refresh this page. I can just enter new numbers. So 1 and 1 is $7. That should be my first message. That seems like a reasonable amount. Enjoy. Okay, that matches that. 7. Okay, and then like 2 and 2 was 28, so maybe 2 and 3 is going to be, okay, 42 is the next message. Do you have any money left over for food? And then the last message is greater than 50, so I can do like a really big number, like $30 per cup. This is like super fancy coffee here. $420 per week. You better quit the habit before you go broke. Cool. So that seems like it's working. Let's go ahead and move on to the next part. Finally, so right now we're doing all this logging, which is great for us as developers to make sure it works. The user doesn't see anything, right? If I hide this console and refresh it and click the button, the user is like, what's wrong? The page is broken. So let me open up that console again, right? When we're developing, we want to keep it open. Put it in the page, right? So that sounds like a document dot get element by ID. Some ID value dot inner HTML is the message. Okay. Where am I putting it? I see a results ID. That probably is the place where we want to put it. It also says our feedback to you, and that's where it is. So let me put it there. All right, let's try that. Refresh the page. Click. And there's the message that shows up. If I get rid of the console, click, click, click. So $30 coffee is too expensive. $3 coffee is at 2 coffees per day, still not cheap. Now, it would be nice if the user also got to see the total weekly cost, right? Not just the message about it. So maybe we'll add that in here. So maybe we'll say, so the message is one of these. And then down here, we're going to say that the var cost message is you spend plus the weekly cost, a dollar sign right before that, and then 2 fixed 2. This 2 fixed is going to tell it, hey, only use 2 places after the decimal point, right? Because we only want to report up to the cents. It doesn't make sense to report more decimal places than that for dollar amounts. Per week on coffee. All right, and this is getting a little long, so I'm going to use some parentheses to, whoops, editor, a little bit overzealous there. Parentheses just to split it onto multiple lines. All right, you spend that much per week on coffee, with maybe a period in there. And then the var full message is the cost message plus a break tag to make a new line in the HTML plus the original message. And I'm going to put the full message into the page itself. Let's try that. Click it. You spend $42 per week on coffee. Do you have any money left over for food? We could do like some decimal number here that doesn't make any sense and see it only reports 2 decimals there. That's why I used 2 fixed. If we have like a $1 or 1 coffee per day and $1 per cup, that's really cheap coffee. $7 per week seems like a reasonable enjoy. So this looks like it's working. Okay, so that is the coffee calculator task. I've gone through all the parts of this solution and shown you how I would program it. I know you may have questions about this, about how to define functions, how they work, all that stuff. We're keeping it simple for this week. Our functions have no parameters. They don't return any results. We'll get to those concepts starting next week. But functions, right, are a way of storing code for use later. And one of the ways we can use it later is attaching it to a button. So that click this button, this function happens, which is pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and end this video now. I just want to encourage you to drop by office hours to work on this lab or whatever, or if you have any questions at all. Thank you for watching. Bye.